Usually when we think about a fruit fly, it's just like that annoying little speck buzzing around a brown banana on your kitchen counter.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Just a nuisance.
Right. But if you actually stop and, watch one, their capabilities are kind of staggering. I mean, you watch one effortlessly land completely upside down on your ceiling.
Or pull off one of those dizzying, blink and you miss it midair evasive maneuvers when you try to swat it away.
Exactly. It happens in a fraction of a second.
And you're just left swatting at empty air. It's a remarkable feat of biology, really. When you consider the sheer scale of the calculations required to pull that off, it's massive.
Because it's not just flying. Right.
Right. It's processing visual input, calculating the physics of the air, constantly adjusting to gravity and momentum, all in milliseconds. It is a massive computational problem.
Which brings up a question that has baffled scientists for, well, a long time. How does a tiny microscopic nervous system actually do it?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Because neuroscience has historically tried to answer that by looking almost exclusively at the brain. But treating the brain like an isolated computer in a jar, it misses a massive part of the equation.
It misses the body entirely.
Exactly. You can't truly understand what a brain is doing without understanding the physical, mechanical body it's driving and the environment that body is pushing against. It's this continuous, closed feedback loop between mind, body, and world.
And that feedback loop is basically the foundation of today's deep dive. We are looking at a groundbreaking paper that details the creation of a whole-body physics simulation of the fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster.
I love how you pronounce that.
I try my best. But seriously, the researchers here haven't just modeled a brain. They have essentially constructed a complete digital twin of a biological creature and uploaded it into a physics engine.
Which is just wild. So our mission today is to unpack the sheer ingenuity behind this project. We're going to explore how they use high-tech microscopy to build a hyper-accurate 3D body from the ground up.
And how they developed custom physics to simulate aerodynamic lift and sticky feet without, crashing the computer.
Right, and then how they trained an AI brain to actually control this digital avatar. By the end of this, you'll see how this virtual fly offers a revolutionary shortcut to deciphering how brains and bodies interact.
To really appreciate the simulation, we have to start with the chassis. Because you can't simulate biological movement if the virtual joints don't bend exactly like the real ones.
Makes sense. If the mechanics are wrong, the brain's commands won't translate to realistic movement.
Exactly. So the researchers started with actual living adult female flies, specifically 5 to 6 day old females, and they captured high-resolution images of their entire bodies using confocal fluorescence microscopy.
Okay, I was trying to picture this process earlier. I figured you couldn't just, stick a whole intact fly under a scanner and expect to see how its knees work.
No, definitely not.
Because the muscles and organs would just be in the way. Right.
They are entirely in the way. Soft tissue is messy and opaque. From a biomechanical engineering standpoint, it obscures the rigid mechanical linkages you actually need to see.
So what did they do?
They undertook a meticulous dissection. They separated the head, thorax, wings, and legs, and then submerged these parts in a chemical called trypsin.
Trypsin.
Yeah.
Okay, so that essentially digests proteins. So they're dissolving all the soft tissue, all the muscle fibers, and the internal organs.
Yep. And then they bleached the remains. What you were left with is an empty, transparent suit of insect armor.
A completely hollow exoskeleton. But wait, making it transparent creates a new problem for the microscope, doesn't it?
It does. You need a way to make the crucial mechanical structures visible again. So they solved this by using a specific dye called Congo red.
Ah, Congo red, because that binds to chitin, right?
Yeah.
Which is the hard structural material that makes up the insect's exoskeleton.
Right. By staining this hollowed-out armor, they created a glowing map of just the hard mechanics. They could pinpoint the exact pivot points of the microscopic joints. And they could see the precise sites where the tendons insert into the shell to pull on those joints.
It's kind of similar to how animatronics are designed for theme parks,
Yeah.
The engineers don't build a silicone skin first.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, they spend months perfecting the rigid steel skeleton and the hinges, because if the underlying skeleton is flawed, the movement will always look uncanny and fake.
That structural map is the foundation. So they took these dense, high-resolution microscope scans, which resulted in a raw 3D mesh containing over 22.6 million vertices.
22 million.
Yeah, 22.6 million. And they imported it into the digital world. But a physics engine cannot calculate forces across 22 million distinct points in real time. It would bring the computer to a grinding halt.
I would assume they had to severely reduce the complexity, but if they just automatically downgrade the resolution of a biological scan, they risk losing the subtle curves of the joints.
Which defeats the purpose of the scan in the first place.
Right, so it seems like they'd have to manually carve it up based on the actual
Yeah.
biology.
And that's exactly what they did. They brought the massive mesh into Blender, a 3D modeling software, and painstakingly segmented the fly's body into 67 distinct, rigid components.
67 pieces.
By separating the parts that don't bend from the parts that do, they managed to reduce that unwieldy mesh down to a highly efficient 20,000 polygon model.
Okay, so they have 67 rigid puzzle pieces. But pieces don't move unless they're connected. They had to define what biomechanists call a kinematic tree.
Exactly.
For anyone unfamiliar, think of your own body as a kinematic tree. Your torso is the trunk, your shoulder joint links to your upper arm, your elbow links to your forearm, and so on.
It's a hierarchy of parent and child relationships that dictates how one movement forces another to move.
So how many joints did they find?
The researchers linked their 67 digital components at 66 identified joint locations to build that tree. This gave the virtual fly exactly 102 degrees of freedom.
102, meaning there are 102 independent ways the body can bend, twist, or pivot.
Right. Some joints are simple, 1 degree of freedom hinges, functioning exactly like your knee, which only bends in one plane.
Okay, simple enough.
But others are far more complex, incorporating multiple axes of rotation, almost like the ball and socket joint of your shoulder.
Building a 102 degree of freedom digital skeleton is an impressive modeling achievement for sure. But, I mean, it brings up an issue of validation.
How so?
Well, just because a joint looks correct visually doesn't mean it operates correctly physically. A 3D modeler could easily guess the range of motion wrong, and the physics simulation would be compromised from day one.
That's a fair point. The researchers actually addressed that by comparing the digital skeleton's movements against high-speed multi-camera videos of real flies.
Oh, like doing specific actions.
Specifically, flies engaged in grooming behaviors.
Grooming is the perfect stress test. When a fly is rubbing its legs together or scraping its wings, it's twisting its limbs to their absolute maximum biomechanical limits.
Exactly. So they used a process to mathematically match the poses of the digital skeleton to the poses of the real flies in those grooming videos.
And how did it hold up?
Brilliantly. The data showed that the median error, the physical discrepancy between the real joint position and the digital joint position, was less than 1% of the fly's body length.
Less than 1%.
They proved the mechanical chassis was a near-perfect match to biology.
So, okay, we have this stunningly accurate digital body. But in the computer, it's just a lifeless ragdoll sitting in an empty digital void. A body needs an environment to interact with.
Which is where MuJoCo comes in.
Right, they imported this model into the MuJoCo physics engine, which is a highly respected physics simulator used widely in robotics to basically code the physical laws of the fly's world.
And this introduces one of the most formidable challenges in the simulation, calculating the physics of flight.
Because air is complicated.
Very. Simulating true fluid dynamics, like calculating the real-time interaction of every single air molecule as it bounces off a rapidly flapping, flexible insect wing. It's currently beyond our computational reach for a real-time simulation.
Yeah, I've read that supercomputers take days to simulate just a few seconds of true aerodynamic turbulence.
Right, which means they had to take a mathematical shortcut. The paper describes them building a phenomenological fluid model.
Phenomenological. Try saying that 3 times fast.
I will pass on that.
Yeah.
But they essentially bypassed the impossibly complex molecular physics of the air and boiled flight down to a computationally efficient approximation of 5 aerodynamic forces.
Okay, so narrowing it down.
The data showed that 2 specific forces were doing the vast majority of the work. Viscous drag, which is the air's resistance pushing back against the wing.
And CUDA lift, right.
Yeah.
Which is the lift generated by the circulation of fluid around the edge of the wing as it moves.
Spot on. They modeled the digital wings as slender ellipsoids and utilized polynomial functions to calculate those drag and lift forces based entirely on the velocity and the angle of the wings as they sliced through the virtual space.
Okay, I had to push back on this approach a little bit.
Let's hear it.
Because insect flight is famous specifically because of how chaotic it is. Real flies rely on those transient microvortices, those little swirling tornadoes of air they create with each flap, to stay aloft.
They do, yeah.
Furthermore, a real fly's wing flexes and deforms under pressure, whereas this digital wing is completely rigid. If we are ignoring the microturbulence and the wing flexibility entirely, is this actually a simulation of flight? Or is it just a clever video game trick coded to force the avatar to stay in the air?
It's a vital distinction to make. Look, if the goal of the study was to design a more efficient drone propeller, this model would be totally inadequate because it ignores those complex microaerodynamics.
Right.
But the goal here is to study the nervous system. The researchers optimized the mathematical coefficients of this simplified fluid model until the digital fly could achieve a stable hover that perfectly matched the kinematics of a real hovering fly.
Wait, isn't that just tweaking the math until you get the result you want?
It's calibrating the environment to reflect biological reality. Think about it from the perspective of the fly's brain. The nervous system doesn't consciously compute the shape of every microvortex in the air.
I guess that's true.
It senses the time-averaged net resistance against the wing and the net lift keeping the body up. By capturing those net forces accurately, the researchers created a sensoromotor environment that feels functionally identical to real flight as far as the brain's sensory inputs are concerned.
Oh, okay. That reframes it perfectly.
Incorrect.
The brain is reacting to the sum of the forces, not the microscopic causes of those forces.
Precisely.
So they've managed to simulate the air. But flight is only half the fly's repertoire. If this digital fly flies up and lands on a digital ceiling, the physics engine is going to treat it like a rock and immediately drop it to the floor. Gravity is a constant.
Yes, gravity tends to ruin the fun.
So how did they hack the physics engine to allow a fly to walk upside down?
They tackled foot surface interactions by programming adhesion actuators onto the tips of the fly's legs, specifically the tarsal claws.
And I saw they even added these adhesion actuators to the labrum, the fly's mouth. I guess to enable future simulations of feeding or courtship behaviors where the fly interacts with surfaces.
Exactly. It's very forward-thinking.
I actually dug into how this adhesion functions within the Nujoko physics engine because it's a brilliant workaround involving a concept called the friction cone.
Oh, yeah. The friction cone is a great concept.
Right. To understand it, think about pushing a heavy box across your living room floor. Gravity pushes the box down into the floor, creating the normal force. That normal force generates friction.
Right, and the harder the box presses down, the harder you have to push sideways to overcome the friction.
Exactly. So that ratio between the downward force and the sideways force defines the boundary of the friction cone. If you push the box sideways with more force than the downward weight can resist, the box breaks outside the cone and begins to slide.
So, to simulate a sticky foot gripping a wall, these adhesion actuators do not act like digital glue.
No.
Instead, they actively inject force in the normal direction. The code constantly pushes the digital claw directly into the ceiling or the wall.
Oh, I see. By artificially increasing that normal force, they massively widen the friction cone.
Yep. It gives the digital fly an enormous margin of friction so it doesn't slip, even when gravity is pulling it sideways or upside down.
It is a mathematically elegant solution that operates entirely within the native constraints of the physics engine. To ensure it worked dynamically, the researchers stress-tested the fly by generating procedural rolling hills in the simulation.
And these weren't gentle slopes either.
No, they created sine wave terrain with inclines up to 72 degrees and forced the digital fly to traverse them.
The resulting data from that is wild. The fly didn't just rigidly march over them, it dynamically adjusted its grip.
Yeah, it used its front and middle legs to actively pull its body weight up the steep 72-degree inclines.
And then it relied on the adhesion in its hind legs to act as brakes so it wouldn't slide out of control on the way down. It behaved exactly like a biological insect navigating rough terrain.
Incredible. So the physics environment and the anatomical chassis are robust. But a highly complex 102-degree of freedom marionette sitting in a hyper-realistic physics engine still doesn't do anything on its own.
Right, you need the puppeteer. You need a nervous system to process the environment and send the motor commands to the joints.
This is where the computer science really intersects with the biology. To build this brain, they utilize deep reinforcement learning, specifically a technique known as imitation learning.
Yes. They trained artificial neural networks to act as the fly's brain. Specifically, they used multi-layer perceptrons.
Okay, whenever I hear terms like multi-layer perceptron, my eyes tend to glaze over just a little bit. But we're essentially talking about a classic type of AI architecture, right?
We are.
It's a system with multiple layers of artificial neurons. where the data feeds forward from the input layer through hidden layers that process the patterns to an output layer that makes a decision.
That is a very accurate breakdown. It's a robust architecture for mapping complex inputs to specific outputs. But an AI is only as capable as the data it's trained on.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. For the flight controller, they fed the neural network 216 distinct trajectories of real flies executing spontaneous saccades, those rapid, jagged changes in direction.
Right, and also forced evasive maneuvers.
And for walking, they provided 80 minutes of top-down video footage of real flies exploring a flat, circular arena.
But here is the major technical hurdle. Top-down video is strictly two-dimensional. The cameras could track 13 key points on the fly's body from above, like shadows moving on a flat plane. But you can't feed 2D data into a 3D physics engine and expect a leg to bend correctly in three-dimensional space.
The problem is further complicated by occlusion, too. When you watch a fly from above, its legs cross over each other, joints disappear beneath the wings, and the 2D tracking just loses data.
So how do you fix that?
To solve this, they employed regularized inverse kinematics.
Okay, inverse kinematics is essentially working backward, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, bend the knee 45 degrees, which puts the foot here, you say, the foot is here, computer, figure out how the knee must have bent to make that happen.
Correct. They took those 13 2D tracking points and mathematically inferred the complete 3D posture of the fly. They forced the computer to reconstruct the complex 3D shape that cast the 2D shadow.
But if the computer is just guessing the joints based on a shadow, how do they prevent it from, like, bending a knee backward or dislocating a hip just to make the math work?
That is where the regularized part of regularized inverse kinematics comes in. They applied strict mathematical constraints based on that 102 degree of freedom kinematic tree we discussed earlier.
Oh, that's clever.
The computer was only allowed to calculate solutions that fit within the biological limits of the real fly's anatomy.
So they successfully translated the 2D walking video into 3D training data. The AI's reward function was straightforward. Observe the real fly's trajectory and figure out how to fire your 102 digital joints to match that exact body posture and center of mass at every millisecond.
Exactly. But controlling flight is a vastly different challenge than controlling walking.
Because flight happens too fast.
Right, too fast. And the aerodynamic forces are too unforgiving. If you tell a blank neural network to learn how to fly by independently controlling dozens of wing joints from scratch, it will flail wildly and crash for millions of iterations before it ever achieves a single second of sustained lift.
The researchers avoided that by designing a brilliant dual-system architecture. They paired the AI neural network with a separate component called a wing beat pattern generator, or WPG.
The WPG is crucial.
Think of this using a race car analogy. If you put an AI in the driver's seat of a manual race car and tell it to win a race, it first has to learn how pistons fire, how to engage the clutch, and how the transmission gears synchronize before the car moves an inch.
It would crash endlessly. The complexity overwhelms the learning algorithm.
But the WPG acts like an engine that is already idling, holding the car at a steady speed. The WPG is a hard-coded baseline motor program that endlessly repeats a default flapping motion, perfectly calibrated to keep the digital fly in a stable hover.
That engine is always running in the background.
Right. The AI neural network doesn't have to learn how to flap the wings from scratch. It just has to learn how to lightly tap the steering wheel and the brakes.
It only needs to learn the subtle deviations. If the AI wants to turn the fly to the left, it doesn't calculate the entire wing stroke. It simply sends a command to the WPG to alter the pitch of the right wing by a fraction of a degree.
And if it needs to dive, it tweaks the stroke amplitude.
Exactly. The AI is operating as a high-level manager, providing tiny steering corrections to a low-level system that already knows the mechanics of hovering.
And this dual system beautifully reflects biological reality, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Real flies don't consciously calculate every micro-movement of their wings.
Not at all. They control their flight through minuscule deviations from a baseline reflexive wing beat pattern.
So the researchers engineered a digital nervous system that functions hierarchically, mirroring the low-level motor reflex and high-level cognitive control of an actual animal.
So we have to ask the ultimate question. What does this all mean?
Right.
We've successfully simulated a fly that can walk up an icy 72-degree hill and execute a midair evasive maneuver perfectly matched to real biological data. Why go through thousands of hours of dissecting, scanning, and coding to achieve this?
Because of the foundation it lays for the future of neuroscience. The researchers haven't just published a paper, they have released this entire simulation as an open source platform.
Which is huge. It is exceedingly rare to find a single physics-based model that unifies both walking and flying with this level of anatomical and physical rigor.
The authors highlight that it provides an embodied context for future research. This is the crucial takeaway for anyone listening who tracks science news.
We hear constantly about connectomics, right?
Yeah, this massive global scientific effort to map every single neuron and synapse in a brain.
Right.
We actually completed the entire brain map of a fruit fly recently.
But here's the fundamental problem with connectomics. Having a complete map of a brain is like having the schematic for a highly complex computer circuit board, but having no machine to plug it into.
You can trace the circuits all day, but you have no idea what those circuits actually do when the power is turned on.
You can trace a pathway and see that a specific neuron fires and sends a signal to a muscle in the leg. But without a physical body constrained by gravity and physics, you cannot observe how firing that neuron actually changes the animal's interaction with the world.
This digital fly provides the machine. Researchers can now take those real biological brain maps, plug them into this virtual body, and literally watch what the neural circuits do in real time.
And because it is an open source platform, it's designed to evolve. Currently, the digital joints move using idealized torque physics, but future teams can upgrade the model by integrating actual simulated muscle fibers.
Oh, wow. And furthermore, they can add true proprioceptive sensors. Remember that Congo red dye used in the initial scans?
The one that bound to the chitin.
Exactly. That dye also mapped the locations of microscopic hair plates on the fly's neck and joints, which the fly uses to sense its own body's position in space.
So soon, this digital avatar will literally be able to feel its own limbs moving within the simulation, sending that sensory data directly back to the digital brain.
It is the ultimate sandbox for testing how biology translates into behavior. Let's recap this incredible journey. We started with a living insect. Scientists chemically dissolved it down to a bleached, 3D anatomical skeleton.
They painstakingly ported that skeleton into a physics engine where it has to obey gravity and complex fluid dynamics.
And finally, they gave it an AI-driven digital brain that learned to navigate that world by studying high-speed tape of its real-world ancestors.
It represents a stunning synthesis of microscopy, biomechanics, and artificial intelligence, proving that to understand the brain, we must also simulate the body.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, building on the implications of this source material. Right now, we are mapping the neural circuits of fruit flies and dropping them into these hyper-accurate 3D physics engines to decode exactly how behavior emerges from biology.
And the technology is only getting better.
Right. If these physics engines continue to grow exponentially more powerful, and if AI imitation learning keeps accelerating, well, how long before we possess the computational power and the biological data to build a biologically accurate sensoromotor simulation of a human being?
That's a profound thought.
And if we eventually manage to upload a flawless map of a human nervous system into a perfect physical simulation, will it just be a digital twin? Or will it be something closer to the dawn of simulated consciousness? Something to think about next time you see a fruit fly pull off a perfect upside-down landing on your ceiling.